right. So, listen, we're going to jump right in, Rebecca. So, I was so inspired by an article you recently wrote, and I know we've been following each other just in recently, and then you've been producing amazing content. I have to bring her on and like talk about this because I thought it was so relatable. So, I'm going to let you tell the story, but it's the article that's called "You Don't Belong." So, talk to me a bit about. Just tell the audience what that story is about.
Yeah, it's really interesting for me. I sat down, it was Saturday. I was a little tipsy. I had like 2 glasses of wine and I just felt like I need to download some thoughts, And I always get asked, how did you get to where you got in your career? And I thought, I just want to tell people how it is really simply and bluntly and honestly. And I feel I owe that to the followers and I owe that to the clients who keep asking me, okay, you're coaching me, but who are you, right? What have you done in your life, to coach me? And I've been coaching, senior people lately. And so I decided to write very honestly how it started, where I was in the beginning of my career. And as a career coach, I think, as most career coaches, I had to reinvent myself. And that's how I mastered the art of like reinventing careers, right? And I think there's a lot of that I apply in my coaching with my clients, right? So moving a lot, between countries, following the career of someone else, typically the spouse, putting your career on break or just really being creative about it. I started in the nonprofit, then I went into the for-profit and then into consulting. And finally, I started my own business because I can take it wherever I go and that's it. I'm just going to play by my own rules. And, it took time to get there, of course. And it's not easy to scale a coaching business because there's a lot of customization. It's very face-to-face. But I'm working on it and I know you're doing the same. So yeah, I think there's a big market for coaches. And I think, you probably have your own opinion on the topic as well. But I've been noticing at the end of the day, it's not really about finding a new job or getting a bigger salary. People want to belong. They want to belong to a firm. They want to belong to a region. They want to belong to a city where they landed. They want to belong to a team. And so I help them achieve that. And I'm usually working with outliers, outcasts, people who are either too qualified or too senior or too heavy. They were on expat packages and now they have to localize or who are not from the region where they're at, so they don't have a network. They didn't study there. They don't have friends there that can hook them up. So I usually work with those kind of people, and belonging has also always been on my mind. I don't live in my comfort zone. I've never really had a long time chilling in my comfort zone or comfort industry or region, and so I guess that's what makes me, relate. Yeah, that's why I relate to them. That's why I can work with them, I guess. Yeah. So that's
you've been there essentially, like what that feeling is like, perhaps, right? Like when you feel like, where do I really belong? And like from your background, like you having being from Brazil and then having grown up in Algeria and then all over the other places and kind of again following the career of somebody else until you're like, well, what am I doing, right? So I think what makes it interesting is that so many people are going through this, and I'm curious or at some point in their life, like, right, at some points, so many people go through like, okay, like, what am I doing and what's my purpose and where do I really belong? And this happens particularly for people like expats, right? Especially when you leave your home country and you become this, I don't know, global citizen or third culture kid, if you want to call it that. And it's very difficult to find that space, let alone a career, and be able to kind of build a life somewhere. But I'm curious, like when you talk to these people, because you and I both know people have to be ready for that interaction, for that coaching session, that they have to be in a specific mindset, like, okay, I'm ready to be open for this change. So people that come to you, like, what do you see as the kind of driving force for them wanting to, change their career or regions, etc.? Like, what's usually the cause? Is there a cause?
It's the change. They have been confronted with change.
Mhm.
or they're anticipating it and they're being strategic about it. So they either got sacked, fired, restructured, that's it. There was a merger and I'm left here hanging and I have, 20 years in this firm. I never interviewed. I was just, sailing along or whatever you want to call it. And now I have to, be strategic and intentional and purposeful about my career. Oh, how do I interview? Oh my God, my CV, my LinkedIn, I don't even know how to use the tools. And then there's the strategic one who comes with, I'm anticipating change. I've got 6 months, 9 months, 1 year to make that shift. Help me because I want the best setup, the best company, the best title, team, salary, and all that. But one thing for sure, it's never the salary, the motivator. It's just, bouncing back from change, right? After a relocation, a merger, something like.
That's so true, because and change is probably one of the scariest things if you think about, like, it's uncomfortable when it comes to just any kind of change. It's like a threat to us, and like you said, like with people that you work with, if somebody's been in a position for 15 to 20 years and all of a sudden they found themselves out looking for a job, like how do you even wrap your head around that, right? Like how do you even, like what do you even do with, like, where do you even start? And have you seen, so when it comes to change, because we all experienced a lot of change since 2020, so have you seen a bigger shift in this last couple of years? Have you seen like more people looking for change, or is it pretty standard to what it was prior to 2020?
No, when I started, I was helping. So I started at the very, sort of like non-strategic roles, if you want. So people who were very junior, just, I was a nanny, an au pair, and now I want to stay here in this country and make, the best out of the opportunity. So I started there with those kinds of profiles and working them into a corporate role. And then little by little, I went into more strategic roles. And then what I've noticed is that the place where you need the most support, it's either going to be at the very early stage of your career, like recent grads, or at a very senior stage when you have 20, 30 years of experience. It's never in mid-management because there's so many roles. It's very dynamic. It's, and of course, it depends also on what you do. Of course, COVID accelerated a lot of the job, seekers, and it's definitely intense now. But also, what I know is that all these digitalization trends just made in-betweeners very uncomfortable. Meaning, like, I'm gonna exaggerate a little bit, but it's either you're building a really cool product or you're selling it really well. Everything in between is kind of automatable, replaceable, digitalizable. We can get you out of the equation easy and fast. So like, project management or business analyst or roles that you can quickly, replace, outsource, delegate, put an AI software to do that kind of stuff so you have a shift in the traditional in between roles. So I think if you want to be strategic with your career, be really good at, whether you're an engineer, whether you're a software developer. I mean, you're either really good at building whatever it is you build, a scientist, or you have all these hard skills that are not so easy to automate, or you're an amazing client-facing professional, account manager, business development, sales. You have a great network of people, and you can leverage that. If you're in between, it's hard. It's harder. Yeah.
And you're right. I guess you mentioned something about, the hardest times is when you're a fresh graduate, because it's difficult to kind of get into that workforce when companies are like asking for work experience, but then an internship doesn't count. So you're in this like hard place. You're like, okay, well, what do I do? Like, how do I actually get experience? And then as you're senior, because you kind of have a lot, you've reached that comfort zone essentially in your career, perhaps you have the salary, the title, etc. And then that makes it very difficult. But I also see, like, I like to kind of joke around, and I'm sure I've heard it somewhere, so it's not my saying, but I think I've heard it somewhere, and somebody said, a lot of careers die at mid-level, because I feel that it's very difficult. Like, it's also like mid-level professionals have a very difficult time jumping to that senior level, because there's a definite skill set that separates somebody who's at mid-management who's ready for senior level, right? So, and a lot of those are those kind of people skills, sales skills, business development. Like, are you able to drive business? Are you able to bring in revenue, etc.? So I think that, I mean, looking at just the spectrum of careers, it's like no matter where you are, it's just there are its own challenges and changes, and there has to be a strategy, like you said, like there has to be some kind of strategy. So I'm curious, like, what do you like? First of all, question: do you think people know what they want? Like, when the people you talk with, do people really know what they want out of their careers?
It's funny that you say that. I mean, they're clear about what they don't want. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always trying to harness that and figure out, okay, let's go by elimination then. Of course, I have a clear idea of what they could do, what's their value in the market. And I'm going to, try to influence the process. But at the same time, I don't want to, limit their dreams. So I have to be mindful of letting them pilot and be just a really good co-pilot. But I just know the shortcuts, right? So I know how to get there faster. And I probably thought of routes that they haven't thought of. Like, if you're in finance, okay, let's look at fintech, let's look at, crypto and or impact investing. Let's look at industries that are not going to die in the next, 20 years or so: oil and gas, energy, tobacco, and let's be strategic about what we're going to be aiming for, because I don't want you to just get a job. I want you to develop a career as of now, right? That's going to keep you safe for 5 to 10 years. So I don't have you coming back to me in a year, right? So that's also not the kind of coaching I want to deliver. But yeah, I mean, finding a job is a lot simpler than developing a strategic career. Yeah. So that's a different ballgame for sure.
Yeah. So if you had to, so you mentioned shortcuts. Is there like a, I don't know, like a shortcut that everybody should know about, or like a couple of things that you like every career, like every person in a profession, no matter where they are, they need to keep these things in mind? Is there like a theme that people need to keep in mind that you see missing from conversations that you have?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing that I've noticed is that, people are just very focused on the big brands, oh, I want to be at Nestle, Coca-Cola, P&G, Unilever. And I'm like, that's great. But a lot of these companies, they grow from within, they promote from within. You are already pretty senior, and, we need to look at companies that are not in everybody's, because that's unfortunately, I mean, they just have so much available talent to source from. So let's look at companies that not everyone is looking at. And then, so we look at IPO calendars, we search through different channels for companies that are, one, well-backed, two, in an industry that's going to be around for the next, 50 years, if not more, not something that's disappearing and easily, that's going to be replaced, right? So, automotive, well, let's look at mobility. So if we're looking at, like I said, financial services, let's look at fintech. So I try to push them a little bit forward in their, in the strategy that they have for the industry choices and also the company choices. It doesn't matter what they sell, if it's a product or service. At the end of the day, what matters is, are they growing? Do they have solid investment? Are they backed by solid financial, do they have resources to hire, and money to spend? Because that's where you want to be, not in a company that's downsizing and restructuring, even if it's a big name, right? No.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I see this as well. The people always go, like, especially fresh graduates, they go for these big names because it sounds great. And I'm like, but you don't even know what it's like to work there. Like, do you even have an idea? Because you might be miserable. Like, are you ready to really, like, is that what you really want? And I think that's kind of what's, the hot and trendy, right? That's kind of what these push a lot of times. Like, this is the names. But you're right, they're not the only companies out there. And in fact, more than half of the market is actually SMEs, like small and medium-sized businesses. that are doing impactful things that also pay well, that have growth opportunities, and you're not just piece of the, this little piece of a bigger puzzle, which I guess goes back to people knowing what they want and why they want it,
Yeah.
So it's like there's a lot of fresh graduates that want things just because it's a big name, or the expectation of what that career is going to give you. But as you and I both know, having to kind of create our own career paths, essentially, that it's not always the case, which actually brings me to my next point. I see that nowadays we have the potential to create our own pathways like never before. So especially for like senior people, like who have loads of experience, who can now go into doing their own thing, perhaps working independently, right? So have you seen that shift in recent years? Has that picked up, or are people still kind of choosing the very traditional career paths?
I think, as you spoke, you reminded me of a client that I'm working with, and he's a great, marketing lead. And he's also a big fan of all things being diverse and inclusive. I mean, so I told him, listen, if you're defining yourself as somebody who stands for diversity and inclusion, whether or not your background is aligned with it, but I feel like you don't have to wait until you get a title that says diversity and inclusion lead to be that person. You are in marketing, market it. And it's really funny because, they can be really great at marketing products, but themselves, it's like a different animal. So we are a brand, my name is a brand, your name is a brand, and, we choose how we want to associate our brand. And so we started to work on, so he has so many different nationalities. He lived everywhere. He speaks many languages. So we started to work on positioning him as that person before he even has the chance to work in that space officially. So, I mean, you probably know that as well. I mean, you probably did that. I started my career because I wasn't a fit for any career. And then I created my own, it's like, okay, no one wants to hire me. I'm going to start offering my services as a resume writer. That's how I started. I was selling the resume for like, I don't know, $20 or something. And then it went up to, I don't know, it was 60 and then 80. And then I'm like, wow, people are still buying it. And eventually, it became more and more strategic, right? So, and now I'm like, whatever you want to call it, outplacement specialist, learning, training, development. But at the end of the day, I invented my own sort of space, and I just stood there with my flag, and this is what I do. And if you're not going to hire me, I'm just going to do it on my own. And eventually, you start to see the fruits of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's so powerful because. And I come across people that also kind of like, there's a term for it I recently heard, it's called multi-passionate entrepreneur, right? So like, or like somebody who's just has different interests, but they cannot be put in this box. Like, and that's what companies look for. They want somebody that fits perfectly into a box and ticks all the checklist on their job descriptions, etc. And that's not always the case. And there's many people that are like that. And what I love about it is that you're like, I'm just going to start. And I think that's where it's at. And I see that at the end of the day, and I mean, I really believe that you can be in a particular position for 10 years. Beautiful, good for you. But what you learn within those 10 years varies for different people. There are people that are in certain positions for 10 years, they don't gain that much new knowledge. So they're already behind the market versus somebody who might not come from a very professional kind of background in terms of specific experience, but they've been so head on for a year or 2 years, so actively learning and engaging and doing and practicing certain things that they have a lot more to offer in terms of value than the person who's been in a position for 10 years. So I think when I see certain things like job descriptions, like I get it, like you need to have that, but what is the proof that this person can actually do it? Like, it's not just about number of years of experience. Like, you have to look beyond it, because there are a lot of people like ourselves who's kind of created the career, and you're spot on about the branding. And I think that's probably one of the things that I see people missing, especially people that are kind of like multi-passionate, multi-areas, is like, what's your brand? Like, you have to understand your brand and be able to sell it. And like you said, you are a product. So you're a product, you're launching yourself into the market. So what does that look like? And like, who's your audience? Who are you selling it to? How are you selling it? So, I mean, that's so spot on, honestly. And yeah, I feel very strongly about it, because I think that we're hiring the wrong way. I think we're overlooking a lot of potential. HR could do a better job in terms of spotting potential. But anyway, but yeah, talk to me a little bit about what do you think about that? I went on a rampage. I love this topic.
No, I love it. It's so aligned, absolutely aligned. And it's, I had this client, he told me, I had this interview. It was a senior level role. And they asked me, what do you do in terms of community projects? And then I was like, what? Community what? I don't participate in my community. I'm not sure I should. What are you expecting me to do community-wise? And that's when the recruiter got a bit discouraged, he told me, because I guess she was expecting me to be this like super busy networker, active in my community, building, I don't know, people's capabilities around me. And I couldn't think about anything like community-wise. I'm not engaged. I mean, I just speak to the parents of the school of my kids, and I think that's good enough. And I'm like, yeah, well, unfortunately, if you don't have at a senior level, right? If you're going to be the face of the company, if you don't have a solid, strategy for your social media platforms, if you are not producing content and establishing yourself as an authority in your field, it's just that less impressive, right? It depends on the company, right? This was a more progressive company, and they're looking for these people who are, okay, it's great, but you also have to show us that you are going way beyond the call of duty in your region, in your community, in your platforms. Because, all these followers that you have, they'll come with you when you join, right? So I think, nowadays it's probably better to have 10,000 followers than to have 10,000 in your bank account. I mean, in that sense, it's very powerful. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's kind of where also it becomes difficult when you're at mid-level and you're trying to jump into senior level, because in many industries, not all, but in many industries and positions, it's more about who do you know, right? It's more about your ability to influence people. It's more about, putting yourself out there, because we know for a fact that there's a lot of people in positions, not because they're the best to be there, but because they've marketed themselves more effectively than somebody who might have better qualifications, but they didn't put themselves out there. And I always joke with some of my clients, and I say, you can have the best CV in the world, but if nobody knows about it, it's completely irrelevant. Like, you can have the best put CV in the world, but if you don't market it effectively and like strategically, and you don't market yourself, right, it's very difficult for people to notice. But then the question comes up, like, what about those people that are, they're just simply a little bit more introverted and don't want to be in the spotlight, yet they're probably great leaders, but maybe they're just not into kind of being in the spotlight. Have you come across anybody like that? Like, because that's one I stumble with quite a bit. Like, what happens in that case? Like, how do you position yourself?
There's two types, I think, so there's the person who unfortunately doesn't have control over their own brand. Like, if you work at Apple, for example, you can't just show up and do a podcast like this, like you have to ask for permission, and it's very complicated, and you need to be sure what you're going to say or not say. Are you going to talk about the firm or not? And their products are super, super, confidential. And so I think it depends on who you work for. And then so there's that limiting factor. And then a lot of people are scared. They tell me, I don't want to improve and embellish and optimize my LinkedIn, because then my boss is going to think I'm looking, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's probably true. But at the same time, gone are the days where loyalty was, no one starts a job after they graduate and then retire from that firm.
Yeah.
30 years later. I mean, these are rare cases that I've seen maybe, 5 times in my 5 years of coaching. So I don't think people should, and no one can expect that level of devotion, so you got to be promiscuous, when it comes to your career, and so maybe that's why I chose to be a contractor, which means, I charge by project or by hour, and I work with the people I want to work with. And I'm very clear about the fact that I'm going to be working with interesting projects at an interesting rate. And I'll be loyal and faithful, of course, to those clients with who I work with, but there's no buying me. I am my own brand. I hold my own ground in that sense. So, but then again, you're not an employee, you're right. You're a contractor. You have to pay your own, benefits and all that stuff. So it's a different ball game. But I think that's where we're heading slowly and surely. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really spot on. And I want to actually touch base on the point that you said about how employers are kind of afraid, right, that that your employer is going to notice that you're looking for a job. And I think that, like you said, that world where employers are kind of dictating employees, I guess there's more opportunities today than ever before. And I think employers need to recognize that. And of course, it's not in all parts of the world. You and I both know in different parts of the world, different circumstances. But generally, we see the shift where it's really is becoming an employees market in many parts of the world. And when people say that to me, and I'm like, but as an employer, you have a choice, because good talent is difficult to find. Great talent is difficult to find, and it's even difficult to keep. So the best thing you can do as an employer is to work together with this person, which is where also that, the relationship of, manager and employee comes into play, right? Like if you're able to find a way to make sure that this person is satisfied and growing in their career, and keep them for as long as you can, because the reality is they're going to leave, whether at some point they're going to leave. Right. So you can't control that. The best thing you can do is, work as partners, right?
Yeah.
And to say, what is it that drives you? Where can you, grow within this company that benefits both? And when I talk to employees and employers, I say, you have to look at individual goals and values and purpose and drive and company organizational goals, and look at how those two can align. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Where the days are gone when you're like, your employer threatens you, right? To, you can't update your LinkedIn, or they get scared, which if you're an employer listening to this, if you're nervous, and when you see your people updating your LinkedIn, you need to check in with yourself and ask yourself, what is it that you're doing that creates this lack of trust, lack of transparency? And why would you want your employees to be afraid to update their LinkedIn? Because if they're out there in the market, that means you've developed amazing and great staff. Like, it's just mind-boggling to me. Like, how do we?
No, I mean, I can understand. No, I understand the employer, and I understand the employee. But like you said, I partnership rather than a sort of you belong to me, and people just don't have the patience anymore for that kind of. They want to be partnering with you in the business, bringing clients in, business in, sharing their ideas, and promoting your content with their followers, and there's got to be this sort of cross pollination or cross-functional, and I would say even the job descriptions, I think they're just so obsolete nowadays. Like, if we could just, instead of promoting a job description, promote the company, the vision. This is what we stand for. You have skills that we can use. Let's talk, because we're constantly in need of qualified people, and we could try to find out where you could fit in the puzzle of our business, rather than here's a job description, and we need that perfect fit, which never actually happens, by the way. It's wishful thinking, and trying to find that match. I think one thing as a recruiter, I started as a recruiter, and I realized very early that, oh my God, job descriptions are completely useless. What they care about is, Rebecca, give me more of what I already have in house. So I would just clone existing talent and bring that to them, and then they would hire. But if I was to read the job description and bring them exactly what's on the job description, they would be like, oh no, that's not what we want. And I'm like, but that's exactly what you wrote, and then little did I know that, well, they just want more of what they already have. That's it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, I think culture play, like culture of a company, because we want somebody who's going to not only be able to do the job, so not only the skill set, but also somebody who's going to be very nicely part of the team, right? So somebody who's going to fit into the culture that the leadership has developed in a company. Otherwise, if the person is very different, there might be some friction, and try to bring them on board and kind of assimilate them into that company. So.
Yeah. To fit that specific box instead of, and I think that's why, startups are so exciting to work for. A lot of people just underestimate how much they can pay, and how, yes, you work hard, but you're really part of something, where you can belong. It's a big sort of family, and at least when they're small, where you can, I can prepare this. I'm good at content creation, but you're an engineer, but still you're part of the social media, whatever committee steering group, and you contribute there. Why not? Because I have those skills that I've developed on the side, and I want to put that to use. That really creates engagement, I think, and keeps the client, the candidate or the employee happy for longer.
Yeah. And that's actually sparks the thought that I just keep coming back, that it's so important to know, what do you want and why do you want specific things, because that just goes back to belonging, right? Like, where do you see yourself belonging more? And I think no matter where we are in our careers, I feel that we're so influenced by society, and in terms of what's hot and trendy and popular and like the big names, that we forget about what is it that I want, like where would I feel more comfortable. And sometimes that means in a startup, or maybe it is being part of the larger, operating machine of a huge corporate, and you just want to be a number, and that you just want to, clock in, clock out, and that's fine. To each his own. There are people who don't want to progress in their careers. It's just not a priority for them, and that's okay as well, right? So it's just about like really making time to figure out like what is it that you want in a world that is completely distracted continuously, right? And so before we start recording this, we talked a little bit about like how can people actually make time, like how can we apply the micro learning kind of strategy to job search, because it is like a full-time job, and there's so many pieces to it, right? So how do you apply this micro learning with your clients?
So what I do is I don't believe I can really make an impact in anyone's career if we don't have at least, weekly meetings for, 3 to 4 months in a row. Because I really believe, just like in language, because I've learned, and you probably also have an opinion about the topic, but when I learn a language, I just immersion, I feel like you gotta like put all of it. For 3 months, you have classes every single day. You watch movies in that language. You listen to music in that language. You just really hang out with people who are from that tribe. And then eventually it comes out, and then you ideally, take a trip to that country, and right after that immersion. And then your tongue just, you will see progress that way, versus taking a class once a week for a year, every week. There is no magic there. If you take on a coaching, whatever it is, whether you want to build muscle, build up your career, I don't know what you're trying to do, change your routine, but do it for like 3 months, almost like on a daily basis. Have checkpoints, like an accountability person, coach, mentor, whatever that person, virtual or face-to-face, once a week for at least an hour to gather your thoughts, your insights, debrief, update, and then get back into it and spend at least, a good hour every day on it for 3 to 4 months, and you will see results. There's no way around it. You will see results. You will attract opportunities. You will be able to to align the whole conversation. What is it that you can offer in terms of value? What are the achievements that you're most proud of, and how you display all of that on your CV, LinkedIn, cover letter, you will see results no matter what. I think if you take it seriously, whatever it is you're trying to achieve. Now, I'm very honest with the clients. If they tell me I just want a job that's going to take me to retirement, okay, let's do that. Mm-hmm. I don't, like you said, it's perfectly fine to not be super driven and high achiever. No, I'm fine right now. I just want a 50%. I have my kid at home, or I just want to surf through it 9 to 5. That's not my priority at the moment. I have health issues, whatever. So be really honest with yourself, with your coach or your mentor, or whoever is guiding you. Do have someone to guide you and push you and be your accountability partner in that sense, because otherwise it's really hard to do it on your own. It will save you time. That's what I tell people. You're going to buy time by having a coach, right? So you can do it on your own, but it's going to take you a lot longer and it's going to be more frustrating for sure. Yeah.
Listen, I've had, when I first jumped into business, I had a business coach, I had a personal brand coach, I've had career coaches before. So it's so impactful to have somebody just to keep you accountable, who's neutral, who's not biased, who just really, you can think with somebody. There's so much power in having somebody who will just listen, who will just ask you questions, who will just put a mirror to you and be like, what is it that you really want? And I love the point that you said. It's like, it needs time and it needs consistency. And that's what I always say is like, if you look at anything that anybody has ever done that's been successful at something, right? Whether from athletes to business leaders to whoever it is, it really just comes down to consistency and discipline. Like, that's it. There's no magic formula. Like, sure, some people have talent and they're just naturally like, or whatever you want to call it. Or some people just have a little bit of a different upbringing that gives them resources and access to things. But just for regular people like you and I, if you just put consistency, discipline to something, you're likely to achieve it, or to at least get closer to where you want to be. And I think, and I love comparing it to like going to the gym or weight loss, because when we start going to the gym, right, you're not going to see results within a month. Okay, maybe you will. It depends, right? Depends on how extreme you are, etc. But the reality is it's going to take you a couple months, right? And same in job search, it's going to take time and consistency. And one thing I always ask people, like when people come to me and they'll be like, well, how long have you been looking? And they'll tell me like 6 months. I'm like, well, what have you changed? Because if you've been looking for 6 months and you have not had any positive results, something is wrong. Same thing as if you're going to the gym for 6 months and you're not getting in shape or losing weight, you're doing something wrong. Like, rethink your strategy, right? So you have to consistency, discipline, but also look, are you progressing? Like, is it moving towards your goal? Because if not, then let's pause. And that's where coaching comes in handy as well, because somebody can offer you an alternative thing to try that you might not have thought about. So
yeah, of course. And I say to my clients sometimes, it's just smoke and mirrors. But honestly, when you go to the supermarket and you're trying to pick, a box of, I don't know, biscuit, there's so many, right? And or cereals. I mean, fiber, no fiber, sugar, no fat. I mean, there's gluten, no dairy. I mean, whatever it is, you pick one. And you can try it until you get home. And usually the packaging is going to be influencing you big time, whether it's the color or whoever is on the cover of it, that's definitely gonna push you to buy that versus any other, right? And there's tons of other, and you only get to try at home, but it's too late. You bought it, that's it. Deal with it. Maybe you love it, maybe you hate it. And I think there's a lot that we can do in terms of packaging for people who are not fitting in, and to get them to a point where they start to believe in themselves. I start believing in them first, and then they start to believe in themselves as well. I think it's just a process of, I don't know. You believe in me. Guess I should also do the same. Unless, I don't know how that works, but it's really that simple. When I start to believe in them, they start to believe in themselves. The packaging plays a big role. And then all of a sudden they're interviewing. They say all the right things in the interviews. They get the job and they're like, okay, I can't believe this is happening. I mean, and then they start with other issues, imposter syndrome or whatever it is, I don't deserve this. Yes, you do. No, I'm a fraud. No, you're not. And so it's really... This is the process is never ending for sure. There's always something to fix.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the part that you said about somebody to believe in you. I think that is it. Like, I think and this is why I started this whole podcast and discussion, because I feel that many people like that I come across, and myself included, I mean, this comes from personal experience. Like for the longest time, I was just downplaying myself and not really pushing myself to the potential until I had people around me. And I've been blessed with amazing managers in my past who just believed in me, who would put these little seeds of this, like, you can do more. And you're definitely, you have the potential for more. And I think it's so powerful, because I think that most of us are not living up to our full potential, right? Most of us, everybody has some kind of insecurity. At some point, we all feel imposter syndrome, and yeah, we feel like frauds, and we need somebody to believe in us, and it's so important. And sometimes other people see things in us we don't see, and for me personally, I mean, again, like I've spent so many years not believing in myself and not realizing how much I have to offer, not to toot my own horn, but like really like how much I have to offer, because I believe everybody has something to offer and everybody's unique and everybody's stories counts. And so, yeah, and like, it's everything, like somebody believing in you, like
you can't imagine how much you can achieve. You only need one person on your side.
That's it.
And all of a sudden the world is yours. And I see this because, I mean, confidence has an internal aspect and then an external aspect to it. You can believe in yourself as much as you want, but if you're the only one believing in yourself, you have a problem. Yeah. But, if you have the external and the internal aligned, you can achieve so much, right? And that's why people, when they lose their jobs, they lose their identity and they kind of like, oh my God, who am I? And so I get some of those cases, because all of the confidence was built externally, right? And so it's an alignment of confidence, I guess, that we need to achieve here together.
Listen, everybody needs somebody in their corner for sure. Listen, I've loved talking to you. Like, we can talk about this for hours. I mean, I think there's so much to uncover, and we're gonna have to do something like another episode and dig into some of these topics, like on personal branding. I think it'll be super interesting. But in the meantime, where can people find you? Where can they follow you? How can they get in touch if somebody's interested to have a chat?
I think on LinkedIn is the fastest way. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook. I mean, I try to be everywhere. Or by email, of course. So yeah, my first name, last name.
I'll drop the links and everything. So that's awesome. Anything, final words you want the audience to take away? Anything that you're like, oh, I really wanted to mention it, but I didn't?
God, it's so hard.
No pressure.
It's nothing to do with your skills, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, people are just looking for an experience and for belonging. And if you can give them that, that's it. They're sold.
Love it. On that note, thanks for coming on. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.